Hello everyone, Cynthia Miller here, and today we're going to paint something that just sort of inspired me out of the blue, talking to my sister about her travels to Portugal. So I called these different doorways somewhere in Portugal. The pictures of the pottery, the sort of plaster that the homes might have on the outside. I love the different textures. This one has more copper looking pots, and as you can see, the steps are a little bit too perfect for me, so I actually did sort of change that a little bit. But this is really the angle that we're going to go with. It looks at the doorway a little bit on sort of an angle, not straight on. This one looks at the doorway straight on, and as I mentioned, it's got a little bit different pots. I use like a really rich reddish brown tones with turquoise, and then the left is eucalyptus and the right is a flowering shrub of some sort. And then this one, the pottery sort of faces where we're looking at right now, and I wanted to sort of shift that so that the pot looks like it belongs sort of on the same plane as the door. So the door is on an angle, and the big pottery on the right hand side also faces the same way as the door. So we've got 3 versions for you, and you can go to my website and get a downloaded template if you like to try this one out. So we're going to get started. Let's get started with our colors. I love my yellow ochre, and I love my burnt sienna, and I've got my colors laid out as you can see on a card, and I highly recommend this. Now I've got a space here cleaned up, and I just spray on a bit of water, and I start bringing in that yellow ochre into that sort of blank slate there. And so I can mix up a little bit of my paint here. I can add more water, I can tone it down, I can brighten it up, and I highly recommend doing this as well. Getting out a card that is the same as your artwork and just trying out that mixture. So that is the number 6 round brush that we're going to start with. We're going to put lots of water on the background only. So this is for the wall. We're going to go around the whole wall and put some water on there. Just a touch of this mixture that we've made up. So you can put on water first and let the color flow a little better, or put on just a touch of that color to start. And then you're going to find that you're going to do another coat on top of that. And again, remember the sort of outside walls of these villages in Mediterranean area would have light colors to reflect the sun, and they would also have like they don't need waterproof like we do here in British Columbia. So you want to imagine that there's the heat and the availability to make the plaster or the clay or the covering of these buildings in that kind of a climate. And it's okay that, I guess my point is to leave marks. It's not going to look like a smooth painted surface. You want it to look a little bit rough. You want it to look interesting. So if there's anything that your paint does naturally that you think, oh, that sort of looks like a plaster wall, then leave it. You don't have to work at this too awfully long, but just continue to put a little bit of the pigment on over top and work that in around the barrels, around the door, to get your wall to be the base to get started. And remember that your paint will dry quite a bit lighter than when you put it on, and so put a little bit extra on there just to give it a little bit of boost. And you'll notice I'm using upward strokes. Try to put that on using upward strokes. Now while we have this beautiful yellow tone in our brush, we're going to mix up just a tiny little bit of the Indian yellow with that. And we're going to paint on some highlights. So the middle of the door, we're going to paint the blue door around this highlight. We want it to look like the sun is shining on the door. And we're also going to do this for the barrel. And just imagine the sun coming in from the top left, and the barrel highlight will be the top left. Now, don't be too concerned about what your brush strokes look like. It's just more the color that we want to put into the background, so that when we start to paint the blue door and the clay pottery, those highlights will shine through. Now you'll notice I'm spreading that color all around the pottery, and you'll notice that when I am through, there is a definite band of a brighter color that sits just where the widest part of the pottery is. Now I mixed up a really lovely blue. I used my Indigo Blue with my Phthalo Blue. It's got sort of this rustic, almost that Greek blue that that you always see in Greek scenes. It's not quite as bright, but you can imagine the door. It's old, old, old. It's wooden. It has cracks in it. And as you can see, I'm using the straight brush here, the 3/4 flat. 3/4 inch flat. And so just really imagine this is the first coat. Maybe this door is brand new right now, and as you paint every layer, it's adding a little bit more of the age to it, and you know, just sort of letting it dry between the applications. And as you can see, we are allowing that sunshine reflection in the center of the door to come through and painting around that. Now remember at the bottom there's going to be quite a bit of a darker shade all along where the edge of the door meets the door jamb. That's going to be quite a bit darker, and we're just going to try to, you know, keep those strokes up and down so it looks like wood panels. And we'll just add more and more layers as we go, building on the bottom. The top will also be a little bit darker just where it touches the door jamb, and then all along the left hand side. And I'm using my same two blues. The Indigo Blue adds a little bit of granular texture, and the Phthalo Blue, like I said, is sort of that brighter blue, with the indigo adding sort of the age to it, you know, the rustic look to it. Now I've mixed up a bit of the burnt sienna, and I'm just going to do a very light layer on the window above the door. And so there's a piece of wood above the door, and then this is above the piece of wood. And it's good to paint every other section of your painting so that it lets the one section dry. You don't want the wood to be blurring into the door and vice versa. So you'll notice in this version on the right hand side I did use the same burnt sienna, and I just made a wall. So now we get into the fun part where we actually paint the pottery, and I mixed a really nice rich pottery color, Madder Lake Deep Red and the burnt sienna. And when you mix this up, you can do any version of it, light to dark, and then just use that particular, you know, sort of mix to put in your shadows. And you'll notice I'm doing circular strokes around the volume of the barrel to make it look like it does have mass. It's curved on the edges, so you're going to make the bottom and the back piece a little bit darker. But as you do this layer upon layer again, it starts to take on form with the you know, the hard lines as well as where you blend them in. So just have fun with this one and use the brightest first with that red coming through, and then bring in the browns and let the yellow continue to sort of be the undertone of it, so it looks like the sun is bringing that out in the pottery. So I really like the way that this starts to take shape, and just adding a little bit more deeper hue of the burnt sienna. And I'm going to start to fill in the design of the barrel about midway around, and to make it look like there's a bit of a handle there, and again with the angle that comes at the same angle as the door rather than looking right at you. And I really like the way that this turned out. I think that you know, painting pottery is kind of a unique thing. It can be your own design, and it's just sort of neat the way that it transforms and becomes a little bit more interesting. I'm pointing out where it's a little bit darker on the inside, and you see that handle, the part that comes forward is quite light, and then there's a design that goes up the center and then around the rim of the barrel. And I think that by putting these designs, you actually make it a little bit more realistic rather than just a plain pottery color. So just keep the handle light on the upper part and then just fill in those designs. And I'm using a smaller brush. This is about a 2, I think. And I'm just dabbing. You can see that I'm just dabbing a little bit of paint on as I go around, and this gives it a little bit of texture. It gives it the little bit of design, so it's a little bit looks like it's raised edges. And just going around the bottom, filling in some more dark tones because you want it to look like there's a shadow at the bottom. So I'm mixing up a color for the door jamb, and I wanted it to be brown, but not necessarily the same brown that I've been using. I've been using burnt sienna, and this is burnt umber, and it's just a little bit darker, a little bit more chocolate color. And I'm just going to start with a very light sort of application, and this is the wood that goes along the side of the door, and this is really what gives it the three-dimensional look. And this design of the door is really quite interesting, with the piece of wood above the door, and then this sort of curves along to give it the arch shape at the top. But it is a piece of wood in my mind, and so again, I'm just adding a little bit more of the pigment to give it that look of wood, and I'm using upward, downward strokes. I'm using probably this is a 1/2 inch, I believe, flat brush to do this. I don't want to go too big. And then I'm just adding a little bit more at the bottom. And again, it's not a smooth look. I want it to be a little bit rough. It's been there for many years. It's rustic. It's endured the sun and the many years of aging. And so just allowing that paint to dry like that. So I have relied on my old trusty Payne's Gray here. I'm just mapping out the steps. I'm thinking about what is going to be highlighted, what is going to be darker, and what sort of paint strokes I can use, brush strokes I can use to ensure that look comes across how I see it in my mind. So this is the front part of the step, the same plane that the wall is on. It's going to continue behind the pottery, and the top of the step is going to be quite a bit lighter, and of course there's going to be shadows around the pots and that sort of thing. So just sort of play with that and imagine the shape of the step coming together. It comes out from the wall, from behind the pots, and it just brings all kinds of different shades together. I'm using that same Payne's Gray, and you can mix the Payne's Gray with a little bit of, it's just a gray that goes to black, but you can mix that with a little bit of blue or a little bit of your brown even to start painting the shadows. So there's going to be shadows on the wall from the barrel, from the pottery that sits on top of the barrel. It's actually a separate pot that sits on top of the barrel, and it's going to be quite dark, and so you're going to add lots of layers to the wall behind the pottery to just make sure that you've got that look that it's standing out from the wall. There's a shadow on the wall. And so this is sort of the second layer I'm putting on. And it's not going to cover exactly what I covered in the first layer. It's all these different brush strokes that really give it the look. So keep them coming out from the wall. Keep them flat on that same plane as your step. And just fill in where you imagine it to be the darkest places. And so what you're going to do is leave a lighter space where that step comes down. So you've got a bit of darker area close to the step, and then that platform that the step steps down into, that's going to be a little bit lighter there as well. And then everything else it just takes a shadow. So I used a 3/4 inch brush, I believe, the flat brush for this one. So I took out a minute and put in the door handle. Just one little mark. We'll finish that off. Now I decided that I wanted to make this wood, the door frame, just a touch darker. And I think that the whole idea of making something darker makes it really recede. So we want to have that look that this is sort of on an angle. It's the outside of the door. It holds the door. It's the door frame. And it really does have bigger impact when you put another layer on that. Make it just a touch darker. So on to the plants now. I mixed up a little bit of the sap green and some emerald green and use that sort of combination to build my vine around the doorway. And of course, again, it's going to be a little bit darker where it comes out of the pot, and then it's going to be light and airy. And I really did just sort of take a moment and imagine this vine just being a bunch of beautiful leaves, and we'll put in little dots of color for flowers afterwards. And so you're going to leave lots of white. You're going to have it sort of shaped around the door. You don't have to draw this in. Just use your small round brush. This is either 2 or 4, combination of both, and just lay it down and let the brush create those leaf-like patterns. And then on the pot on top of the barrel, this one has more of sort of an outward and upward and downward sort of flow to it, and I like the shape of it. So just imagine you can maybe draw those lines out first, and then just fill in the vines with the leaves, and again leaving lots of white area so that we can fill that in with some colorful pinks and reds. So now I'm mixing up a Quinacridone Rose, and I'm just going in with a 0 to 2 size brush, and I'm not doing round circles. I'm doing sort of little bubbles. Just do 4 or 5 little bubbles in a cluster, and I'm going to just put on a nice random spreading of these, and then I'm going to go over and do it again. I'm going to go over top of these little clusters with another layer of the same color, and it will just add a little bit more dimension to it when you've got a couple of different tones there. And then I choose another pink or red shade that I'll use on the second plant here. And you could put a number of pots, you could put a number of plants in the pots. So just have fun with it. Put maybe different shape of a cluster on these ones that look like they hang down a little bit more, so that it looks like a different flower. And then again, just going in and putting another layer in there. And just using a small brush. You could use a rigger if you wanted to put more detail in. And you could actually put more detail into the leaves as well. And especially after you've got the flowers in there, you can go in there and sharpen up the leaves a little bit. The bottom of the pot, or actually the top of the pots, are going to be a little bit darker. You can just see how that adds a little bit of dimension to it when you put that another layer of dark, where in your mind you believe it belongs. It's where those leaves are bunched together the most, where there's less light getting in, and any place where there's a shadow or no light, basically. And you can actually take a little bit of the Payne's Gray along with a little bit of the green that you've mixed up, and you can put some shadows of the leaves of the flowers, put the shadows on the wall behind the plants. Now you do this very subtly and with a little bit of water so it blends in, but you want it to sort of look like it is patches of shadow of the flowers. So we had a little bit more depth to the greenery and just had a look at all the shadows and finished it up. I hope you enjoyed that, and I do hope that you will check out our website as well, shiftyourcore.com. And yeah, I really like this one that is faced on. You can see the brickwork, the eucalyptus on the left, and the texture of the copper. I will do a copper pot tutorial one of these days. So get out your paints and watch the tutorials and have fun. Thanks for watching. Take care.